Hello, everybody. This is the first episode of the Celtic Rewind Specials. In this special, we will be talking about stopping 10 in a row. Quite ironic in this season, I know, but sure, everyone needs a bit of happiness. I am delighted to be joined by another fellow Celt who knows a lot about that era. His name's Ryan. How are you, Ryan?
Good, Stephen. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks for asking. Just let the people know a wee bit about your Celtic history and what it was like growing up through that era and how you felt as a fan.
Well, obviously it wasn't the best time. I mean, the Dead Club doing 9 wasn't great when they were winning trebles, and seemingly there was no end to it. First game I kind of remember would have been there was a 3-3 game, the 95-96 season against Rangers, where Andreas Thom scored an absolute wonder goal. That would be the first clear memory I would have of watching Celtic. Obviously,
Yeah,
it would have been before that, but that's the first clear one. And then
yeah,
the season after would have been my first game at Parkhead.
yeah. What game was that?
There was a 3-0 win towards the end of that season at home to Aberdeen.
Brilliant, brilliant. At least it was a win you went to anyway.
Uh,
So basically, what's going to happen? Okay, in this special, we're going to talk about loads of ranging topics. Okay, so I was only 5, I think, when Celtic stopped 10 in a row, but I've always wanted to know what it was like as a fan during that era. We've seen a lot of success recently, maybe not so much this season, but that particular era, I always want to know about it. I want to learn a bit more information, as much as I can about Celtic because it's a club I love. So, Ran, the feeling get into that season when we had to stop the 10, what was it like? Did you feel we could do it with Wim Jansen? And also, if you put in there the loss of George Cadetti, Van Hooijdonk, and Di Canio, with that team, without them three, did you think that team could go on and stop the 10? Were you confident?
well, when came in, obviously Tommy Burns had left, which was a blow at the time. And then, as you say, we lost the three amigos pretty much back to back. So Wim had to basically go and rebuild the team. Across Glasgow, of course, Rangers were spending money like nobody's business, and everybody wondered how they were signing the likes of Perini from a Juventus team that were reaching European Cup finals. And I mean, Bran Laudrup was there. That was the summer they signed Lorenzo Amoruso, Jonas Turn. They signed Gattuso from Perugia, I think it was at the time.
Yeah,
So yeah, they were spending big money, and Celtic had to rebuild the team. On top of the three amigos, you also lost Paul McStay to retirement, and if I remember right, that was the summer Peter Grant left. So you'd lost good Celtic men as well, although maybe in a roundabout way that ironically helped because there was players coming in who maybe didn't feel the pressure of having to stop the 10 as much as your Peter Grants and your Paul McStays would have.
yeah. No, you're 100% right. Touching upon, obviously, you said that recruitment was a big, big, major thing. Losing all them players, obviously McStay as well. He quit for injury, so he had to retire. So in terms of the summer recruitment, I have down here, we signed Jonathan Gold. I mean, he was at Celtic a long time, even in the O'Neill era, he was there. Also got Craig Burley, Stefan Mahi, Reggie Blinker. So in terms of the signings, did you think that improved the squad, or did you still think they were lacking getting into that season of all seasons?
I mean, you looked at it, Jonathan Gould, I think, was Bradford's third choice keeper at the time, and you were kind of, I mean, obviously, before that, you were watching Stuart Kerr, Gordon Marshall, so anything was probably an improvement, but
Yeah.
um, you, Bradford's third choice keeper, if Celtic signed that now, people would be throwing the head up and wondering what's going on.
I mean, we're ironically playing with a probably third choice keeper in most setups anyway, and Scott Beans.
No, I know that, but
Yeah,
Mahi, I'm not sure too many people really knew much about Mahi. Craig Burley, had played in the Premiership and all, and people have their opinion on Craig Burley now, but he was absolutely massive that season and us stopping the
yeah,
10. Like,
and the goals
um,
as well. He helped with the squad. Like,
yeah, Reggie Blinker. There's times I wonder. I think Reggie Blinker was one of the poorest Celtic players I've watched, and then in other times I think back and go, no, he had a few cracking games, but he'd absolutely no heart. There was
yeah,
times he was getting into, they weren't even 50-50s, they were 60-40, 70-30 in his favour, and he was pulling out, and you were wondering what he was doing. But I mean, he had the ability, it just maybe not the full package.
Yeah, no, 100%. In terms of the recruitment as well, obviously that summer, Jansen returned to his former club for probably the best player in Celtic's history. More likely is the best player in Celtic history in Henrik Larsson. But at that point, he was £700,000 coming from Feyenoord, and not many people knew of him. And little did we know he would turn out to be the player he would be. And as we're going to talk about, his first touch of the ball ironically led to, I think it was probably the first game of the season against Hibs, wasn't it? Chick
First
Charlie,
season, Hibs.
yeah, Chick Charlie got the ball and he drove home from around 25, 30 yards and they won 2-1. So
Yeah.
you're looking at that going, oh my God, what's happening? What do you think at that point was the Celtics fans' opinion on Henrik Larsson? What,
Well,
in all honesty?
if I can skip ahead a game as well, I went to the first home game of that season. We lost 2-1 to Dunfermline.
Yeah,
So there was a few people remembered Sweden had finished third in the '94 World Cup, and there was a few people remembered Henrik from that team. But then
yeah,
he was playing more of an attacking midfielder than the striker he ended up. But he came off the bench that day against Hibs, and I mean, it was shocking. And Hibs got relegated that year, so losing your first game to Hibs, and then you go to Parkhead, you get beat 2-1 again by Dunfermline, and you know Rangers have Marco Negri across Glasgow banging them in, and you're going, here we go,
yeah.
like we're not even going to put up a fight. Um, Ironically, after the first two games, I think a lot of people thought Henrik was a bit of a dud, um, believe it or not. But obviously, a lot of people were proved wrong on that front. The
Yeah,
other memory I would have had was actually coming home on the boat from the Dunfermline game, and my uncle's mate going into an absolute drunken rant about how the 10 was already, they'd basically already won the 10, and Wim Jansen needed to go. I mean, we were 2 games into the season, but
you say you
it
say
shows you
you
how,
say that you say there
sorry.
are 2 games into the season, but ironically, as we're 6 points adrift of Rangers, so there'll be a lot of Celtic fans up in arms. You can obviously imagine the tension at that time. I mean, the feeling amongst fans must have been, oh my God, this is happening again, and where was the fight going to come from? So in
Yeah,
terms of your uncle, you can probably expect that. Do you know what I mean? What did you feel? What did you feel in your own heart at that time?
well, I mean, if I remember right, after 2 games we were bottom of the league, so you're looking at it going like, this was a Rangers team that, I mean, it had your Andy Gorhams, your Ali McCoy, your Jorg Albert, Brian Laudrup, as I say, that added, or Lorenzo Amoruso. Gattuso wasn't the player he was now, or not now, but that he became to be then. But,
Yeah,
he was expected to be a quality player. Marco Negri was unreal for them up till Christmas. He scored something like, I think it was about 37 goals in all competitions, and then
that's
he
phenomenal.
he got an eye injury, and supposedly it was from playing a squash game, and he got hit in the eye with a squash ball. But rumours in the years since were that Sergio Perini found out he was having an affair with his missus and slapped him about a wee bit. I don't know what the I don't know what the true story is. I mean, Rangers kind of always
So
stuck with the squash story, but Marco Negri didn't kick much of a ball after Christmas, from what I remember, with the injury. So maybe Alt was lucky. 'Cause, I mean, 37 goals at Christmas. I mean, he was on course to probably score more than Henrik did the year we won the treble
yeah.
under own.
So in all thing you're saying, the Rangers camp turned into an episode of Big Brother.
Well, I mean, if that rumour's true, but I mean, Marco Negri did disappear quickly after it. So
It probably is. But touching it back to the Dunfermline again, not so long after that, we did have back-to-back games against the Jansens where Larson did score a wonderful diving header I have down here. So in terms of
yeah,
Larson, he was starting to bring himself out of his shell and come into that striking role. And then we also added in, if I'm correct here, Mark Riper, was it, if I'm correct, the central defender, Danish
from
international? Yeah,
yeah, he was a touch of class. I mean, he made Alan Stubbs look. Him and Alan Stubbs at the back, it was solid. Reaper coming in, and I'm sure you'll touch on it further later, or we'll touch on it further later. And then later on in the season, Paul Lambert and me were
yeah.
two massive signings that year. Um, yeah, it's the old story. Everybody says about a strong spine in the team, and we
Mhm.
probably didn't have that at first until your Reaper and your Lambert come in.
What was it about Reaper that made a big difference to that team? Do you think it was just experience and, as you said, a touch of class?
Yeah, he seemed to organise the back and give them a bit more confidence, and uh, with a consistent back four. Then it
Yeah,
was Tom Boyd or Jackie at right back, and then Reaper, Stubbs, Mahay most of the season from memory.
yeah,
So the consistency as well. When a back four plays together, and then they seem to, ironically, as I was saying, he was Bradford's third choice, but they seem them with Jonathan Gould seemed to be a good unit for us that season.
yeah. No, let's see. In terms of the team going up into them St Johnstone games, and obviously Jansen did steady the ship. There was progress made in all fronts: the League Cup, and also Europe and the UEFA Cup. But before we get into the European side of things, what games stick out in your memory up until then that were up until where we've talked about are key points in that the ten seasons? Is there anything that sticks out in your mind quite clearly?
That St Johnstone game that you spoke about, I think wasn't that far into the season, and I
Yeah,
think
it wouldn't have been no.
was that the first league one. I think maybe.
Yeah, they got the first league win.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was a double header. I think one was in the cup, one was in the league.
yeah. So there was that game was 0-0, and Jonathan Gould pulled off an absolute wonder save. And then not long after, I think we went up the other end, and Henrik scored that diving header you mentioned. And I can't remember if we were 1-up at the time or that Henrik's goal was the opener, but that seemed to be a massive moment. As early in the
Yeah,
season as it sounds, we go 1-0 down there, and you're looking down a barrel of losing again. Is it going to be 9 points? Where's the win coming from? But
yeah.
that game seemed to start something that season.
Yeah, it was like a kickstart type of thing. It was like
Yeah,
you get this
that
game done.
they played Barrack Rangers in the League Cup, and I think they put 7 past Barrack, and then, as you say, progress in the League Cup further and Europe as well. So every wee
Yeah,
win was just building a bit of momentum, and
it,
even
it
at
was
that,
it was
it was
it was
about
all
trying
about.
to back from Rangers.
Yeah, that's what it was. It's just all about trying to get them steps on the Rangers to put pressure on them, which is something that we haven't done this season at all at any stage. We've kind of just handed Rangers a title and went, there you go, we give up in the 10. And
Yeah,
as you said there as well, Ran, the European side of things was something that a lot of Celtic fans they love about Celtic, the European nights. And one of the games that stick out that season, and one of the games I have noted down here I want to talk to you about is the Liverpool game. Well, Liverpool games. What
mm-hmm.
outstanding memory do you have from it? Because I tell you one thing, I would have loved to have been seeing that game in that stadium for that game, like because it sounds brilliant. The 2-2 draw just sounds so thrilling. It sounds so fantastic. What was your memories from it?
Well, I wasn't at it, but if I go back around first, the Tyrrell Innsbruck game in the qualifier was at Parkhead was absolutely mental. Would you beat 2-1 in Austria? And it just went back and forth. We were through, we were out in away goals, we were through, we were out in away goals. And ironically, Henrik scored his first goal at Parkhead that night in the wrong end. But uh, obviously, eventually we went through. And then, as you say, we played Liverpool, and uh, they scored early on, and then we came back, but we're winning 2-1, and shades of what would happen later in the season against Rangers. Steve McMahon picks a ball up the halfway line, and you're screaming, somebody tackle him, and he just runs through and equalises in the last minute, and we
Yeah.
went out away goals then.
But see, in terms of that game, Ran, the Liverpool game would, I know it ended in a 2-2 draw, and as you said, the defensive errors led to the second goal where McManaman scored. But would that not, as a Celtic supporter, even a Celtic player, then give you confidence that you can go toe to toe with Rangers for a course of a season? Because Liverpool, I know as much as people don't like to say it, they're a big club down in England, big club in the world as well. So if you're going toe to toe with them, you're not getting beat, you're keeping clean sheets at Anfield. Would that not give you confidence as a Celtic fan that you can maybe do something in this league?
Yeah, the away game at Anfield probably did more. I mean, we drew 0-0, but if I remember rightly, Simon Donnelly missed a couple of chances down there, and we probably could have got through. Mind you,
Mm.
the argument would be maybe they maybe had gears to go up. You don't know, but I mean, we certainly give as good as we got. And as you say, it probably not only give the fan base a bit of confidence, but made the team think, right, we're clicking together here, and we can maybe at least put up a fight, to not just hand them
Yeah.
the 10.
Yeah, touching upon that game as well, there's a few players I've noted down that played a big part in that. McNamara scored and Donnelly scored. In terms of the season, up until halfway, won't go any further than halfway yet. In terms of the season, how big of players was like the likes of Simon Donnelly and Jackie McNamara, just to add that bit of steel to the team and goals as well? Is that something that came across to the Celtic support?
Yeah, I mean, Simon Donnelly. It was unfortunate the way Simon Donnelly ended up leaving the club. I thought Simon Donnelly was a smashing player. Didn't do much once he left Celtic, as a lot of players don't. But at that
Yeah,
time, like,
strange.
I thought he was probably one of the best players we had in that squad at the time. Again, I mean, Jackie left in unfortunate circumstances in the end, but
Mm,
Jackie's a Celtic legend.
he is, yeah.
There's no question about that in my mind. But yeah, the likes of them, and people have their opinions on him, as I said earlier. But Craig Burley was, I mean, some of the really vital goals that season that Craig Burley scored were, if you don't have Craig Burley that season, you don't stop the 10. And I mean,
Is that how strongly you feel about him? If we didn't have Craig Burley, we wouldn't have stopped the 10.
I think he was a big part of it. You know, obviously not him on his own, but some of the goals
Yeah.
he scored. There was a game my uncle was over at just before Christmas because he actually drove a supporters bus over and he was just about to leave the stadium. We were home to Hearts and he got to the top of the set of steps just at the exit and something made him turn around, and just as he turned around, Craig Burley chested the ball down and scored, and I think it was about 10 minutes to go or something. And
Yeah.
you know, there's another 2 points dropped, and at that stage, you know, I remember I was at a game in October at home to St Johnson. We won 2-0, and I think that was the first time that season we went top of the league. So, you know, it shows you how quick that season turned. But I
Yes,
mean,
it
the
does.
atmosphere coming out that day was unreal. You know, people were buzzing, thinking, right, there's a chance here. We're not just handing Rangers this. You know, they're not. Walter Smith had already announced he was leaving, so it was like he's not getting his big send off. You know,
That yeah, that kind of drove the Celtic players to be like, nah, we're not giving him what he deserves. Take this title away, be back where it belongs, type thing. And
yeah,
in terms of the Liverpool game, I want to move on to this because I don't know maybe if you've heard about this or seen this, but a, a lot of Celtic fans, there's been a lot of rumours as well that Davy Hay, you remember Davy Hay? Yeah,
yeah,
he quit as an assistant manager because he fell out with Jack Brown. Like, obviously that doesn't sound big, but in a grand scheme of things, and a team effort that season, how fatal was that, or how bad was that? Maybe get the team to lose confidence again, that they're not a unit, that they're not going forward together. Was that something that concerned the Celtic fans at that time, or was it just waved away? But the team's just going to stay on the pitch and do the job.
to be honest, I don't remember much about that happening myself.
Yeah,
Again, Jack Brown is another name that at the end of his time at Celtic wasn't exactly the best. Um, the thing was, I don't actually think that the thing that I found strange was I don't actually think Wynn got the pick as one assistant because when Davy Hay left, it was Murdo McLeod. So I don't know how much it affected or didn't affect things. Maybe it did in the sense of Wynn coming in, as I say, people like that who aren't under as much pressure because they're not out and out Celtic men to stop the 10, but having a Celtic man beside him to sort of try and drive home a point that while you
yeah,
don't want them under that level of pressure, that the 10 still couldn't happen.
yeah.
But I
So
mean, as I say, it was just, I think that season, more people were just focused on what was happening on the pitch and making sure the 10 didn't happen.
yeah, so it's just basically like whatever goes on behind the scenes type thing, keep that in house, and we just rattle on here with the team type thing. Yeah.
Maybe not just as simple as that, but yeah, basically, you know, I think it was just trying to keep everything steady and, as I say, stop the 10, which,
Which we'll get to at the end to see if we're done that, but obviously we know we did. But in terms of the games as well, we're going to touch upon here the first Rangers game at Ibrox that we played. Um, on the eve of that game, there was a lot of thing going around that Tosh McKinley had a bust up with Larson and it left him with a
yes.
black eye. Did you know much about that, or do you think that's just a rumor, or do you think that's true?
Well, I don't know what the truth was, but I mean, the Scottish press jumped all over it, as you can imagine. You know,
Yeah,
supposedly Tosh headbutted Henrik, and blah blah blah. I mean, again, there was a program I remember watching on BBC Scotland that was, they do a series, and there was one on that team, the 97-98 team, and
Yeah.
at the time, supposedly it was the Scandinavian players sort of done their own thing, and because there was a lot of Scandinavian players about at the time, with maybe the likes of Mahe and Blinker, and then the Scottish players went out drinking and all a wee bit more and whatnot, trying to build camaraderie. But from what was said on that programme, whether or not the bust up was, there was more made of it or what, it seemed to bring people together more, and
like galvanize the team, because
yeah,
you need that type of fire in a dressing room environment, because you've seen it so many times with certain teams. If you're too soft, you don't get nowhere. And I think that's what a lot of people find hard to get now, because we look at the teams we're watching now and they don't have that backbone. I know we've still got Scott Brown, but he's getting older now and he's maybe losing a bit of influence that he had. You need that type of strong character in the dressing room to take you forward. And if you're getting scrapes, you're getting scrapes. But at the end of the day, it's the team effort, especially in a season like that. And in the Ibrox game itself, Ryan, I'll ask you this, because in a fan's point of view, how confident did you feel to get into that game?
Well, before that, we were actually meant to play Rangers before that season, but the game got rearranged. The first one was meant to be at Parkhead. The game got rearranged because of Princess Diana's death. So we were playing Rangers twice in a matter of 11 days, I think it was. Mm-hmm. So obviously you're looking at it at that stage and you're going, we have to win one of them. You're thinking we have to win one of these games. You're probably looking at winning them on a Parkhead more, because I think it was 2001 before we won an Ibrox again. That was 7 years or something. So, the record then at Ibrox wasn't great. You kind of thought, how many can we keep this down to? In some ways, as terrible as that sounds, you didn't want to go in that at it. But as I say, with the team that they had at the time, and as it's been proven, maybe shouldn't have had. But
yeah, no, you're 100% right. And in the game itself, how did it evolve? What type of things were you seeing? And was Celtic playing well? Were they getting in their faces? That type of thing? Because obviously Rangers did end up winning the game 1-0, and I think Marco Negri scored, if I'm correct.
No, Richard Gough got the winner that day.
Oh, Richard Gough.
Yes, I can still remember it was a poor goal to give away, but a lot of Celtic Rangers games then basically went to the pattern that Andy Gorham just stopped everything we hit at him, and they broke up and scored one, or they broke away and scored, and then we maybe could beat 2 or 3 because the heads went down because they just couldn't put the ball past Gorham. That day, as I say, Richard Gough scored, run away, giving it both hands in the air, 10-10-10 to the main stand at Ibrox, which, as you can imagine, was going absolutely ballistic. And you're looking at it going, well, there you go, we've lost the first derby again, and then there was also a rumour at the end of that season on the championship t-shirts, Celtic had a quote, "Smell the glove," and the rumour is that day that Andy Gorham walked past the dressing room, sniffed the glove, and threw it into the dressing room, going, "There you go, boys, smell the glove, it's stopped 10 or 1-10 in a row." Now, again, on the programme I mentioned earlier, Jonathan Gould came out and said that that's nonsense, and the team actually seen it spray painted somewhere and just started saying it to each other, and that's how it ended up in the t-shirt. I don't know whether that's a bit of bluffing or what. It seems a bit of a strange one, but I mean,
what was it? What was it about Andy Gorham that he had? I mean, I get that he was a great keeper for Rangers, but what was it about the whole Celtic thing that Celtic, every shot after shot or whatever, it used to hit him? My granddad always said that he was just like a wall. I mean, he wasn't spectacularly good, but I think it was a mindset thing that we've seen over the current months of this current Celtic team that you maybe compare to. Like, it's a mental block that they're not going to score that day. What did you think it was in terms of that?
I think it was partially that, but then you yourself would probably remember towards the end of Andy Gorham's career and playing for the likes of Motherwell and stuff.
Yes.
And it was the same story then when, ironically, I mean, we're a far better team then. So he just always seemed to up his level against Celtic. I don't know what it was, because I mean, in them days, like, Rangers went into Europe, and despite all their claims of we'll have one team for the league and one team for Europe, they were getting absolutely routed. And some of the goals Andy Gorham was conceding, you were looking at it going, how is this boy stopping us every time we play. So
If
I
if
don't know.
you if you had to compare Gorham to a recent keeper of Rangers, one springs to mind straight away because we and you talk about him on WhatsApp all the time, and how he does that because you look at him and be like, he's just ordinary. But if you think about Alan McGregor and
Yep.
his Rangers career, it kind of goes towards Gorham because you're like, he's just that one big, excuse the phrase I'm going to use, but one big B bastard who you can't fucking you seem to score past, or he's just there all the time, giving
Yeah,
it abuse. Do you know? Is that what you would say about Gorham?
yeah. I mean, similar to McGregor. I mean, there was games this season. Rangers have won 1-0, and McGregor's maybe pulled off a cracking save, and it was similar with Gorham. Gorham was probably better against Celtic than McGregor was, but again, a lot of the time when McGregor was in playing for Rangers against Celtic, I would say that the Rangers team Gorham played him was probably better than some of the ones
Mm.
McGregor. So McGregor maybe had more to deal with as well against Celtic,
Yeah,
but certainly I can see where you're coming from with a comparison. Where in big moments he
yeah.
just big saves.
It's like it's basically what Celtic are missing this year, a Fraser Foster type keeper. But we'll
Yeah.
we'll move on to something a wee bit more happier. And the first trophy went to Celtic that season with the League Cup, a 3-0 win over Dundee United. In terms of that victory, do you think that was like a catapult towards the end of the season to be like, yes, we can do this, we can take that title? And if so, what do you think changed in the mindset at that particular time?
I actually think the mindset changed slightly 2 games before that. The week after we lost at Ibrox, I was over because we had to go to. There was 2 home games just after that. One was home to Motherwell and one was home to Dundee United. And the supporters club me and my uncle travelled with at the time to get tickets for the League Cup final. It was a case of go to one of them 2 games. Unfortunately, we picked the Motherwell game that they lost 2-0, but we we lost. We lost 2-0 with 2 or 3 goals disallowed that day. Reggie Blinker gets sent off for one of the stupidest elbows I think I've ever seen. And everything just seemed to be falling apart again. But then after that game, we played Rangers that midweek, which was the rearranged derby. And
Yeah.
Marco Negri scored. Um, and we absolutely battered them. And Alan Stubbs popped up in the last minute and equalised. And I think that gives the team a lot of belief to think, right, we can get at them. We can put up a fight here. And then, as you say,
Hmm.
you move on. They beat Dundee United, I think, 4-0 the week before, who they were playing again in the League Cup final. Went to Ibrox that day, scored twice in the first half in a matter of 2 or 3 minutes. Morton Weghorst got the first one, if I remember right.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
sorry. Morton Weghorst either scored or set up the first one. It might have been Reaper. But the first one, anyway, was a header. Henrik hit the second one, and it deflected over the keeper and went in. And Craig Burley finished the job in the second half then. The place was absolutely bouncing. Celtic get 3 stands that day in Ibrox. So, you can imagine the atmosphere. It was
Yeah.
only the second trophy since, what, 1989?
Yeah, no, that's correct. I mean, if you look at it in terms of for any club winning that trophy, winning that first trophy of the season, it must give you that belief that you can do something because the years of dominating with that Rangers team, and obviously we know now that that Rangers team shouldn't have been, but sure we'll have to move on from that, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
that that for me would have been the point where you're like, right, come on, we can do this, we can move on, we can go. So by New Year, I think if I'm correct as well, I have written down that Celtic were involved for a freeway. Kind of at the top, there was Hearts there lurking. There was Rangers. I think they were still top as well. I think we were 4 points adrift at the point. But in that New Year stage, you're looking at the table, going, right, we're not that far off them, and we're going
Yeah.
into that. We're going into the Rangers game quite soon. We'll come on to that as well. So when you're looking at the table in New Year, Ryan, as a Celtic fan, what's going through your mind? Is it like don't drop no more points or the league's over, or if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to win the league eventually? If when you're looking at the table at that point,
Well, it wasn't quite don't drop any more points because despite, that Rangers team, quite similar to this year, although the Rangers team this year just haven't dropped points, but that Rangers team then, which, as I said before, had been winning trebles and doubles and obviously nine, and just there seemed to be a difference that year. I don't know whether teams got a belief against them or similar, maybe, as people would say, the Celtic team this year. It was just the end of an era, and despite the big signings in the summer, they hadn't replaced players correctly. Marco Negri, as I say, getting injured was probably a big part of it as well, but it wasn't quite don't drop points or we're not going to do this. A lot of people at the time probably thought that if we didn't stop it, Hearts could, because Hearts just wouldn't go away that season.
Yeah, it's like they were just constantly there. A bit like under was it George Burley? If I'm correct, that was his name. Yeah, that they were just always there, and he got sacked. But sure, but yeah, on that as well, you're going into that Rangers game in the New Year counter, and you're thinking to yourself, we can probably win this. Is that what your thought was going into that? Because as we sing, I think this was the time that Paul Lambert really, when he came into the fore in that game. What was your memories of Paul Lambert in the Celtic shirt, especially that season?
Well, with St. Paul Lambert from Borussia Dortmund, which at the time for Celtic, that was a big signing. They had won the European Cup the year before. The reason apparently Lambert wanted to come back to Scotland, we were happy enough to take him, obviously. But we also signed Harold Brattbach around about that time. And
yeah, Brattbach, yes, yeah.
Harold Brattbach, obviously, they're vague memories, but I remember him playing for Rosenborg then, and he always seemed to score in the Champions League, and you're thinking, we've got a good striker here, and then it just didn't work out for him at Celtic. But I would say in some ways, he wouldn't have been as good for Celtic as the player I'm about to mention, but he had a similar trait in my eyes, as in, he very rarely let his head go down, despite what was going on around him, as Samaras.
Sammy, what a player to bring up, yeah.
When I say that, there was games you could see brought back confidence sort of dwindling, but then he would get in position for the next chance, and it was similar to Sammy. But I think the Rangers game that we're probably going to touch on next was a big thing with brought back, because Gorham just stopped everything he hit at him that day, and I think if he'd have scored in that game, he'd have just kicked on, and
yeah, I've got down here in my notes as well. As you said, Celtic dominated that game, or majority of that game, and Brattbach couldn't get past Gorham. I mean, they seemed to be like the constant thread of every Celtic striker. And then get into the game as well, you're always feared of Rangers getting a draw or sneaking a win. But in the game, I think Jackie McNamara, from what I've seen and what I've read down, he played a vital part in the first goal, if I'm correct, for Craig Burley. What's your memories of that goal?
Watching that game, it just felt like the same old story. You're missing chance after chance. You're waiting on the sucker punch. And you're maybe thinking, I think then there was a stat where something like, because they always play at a New Year derby then, which usually does still happen now, but doesn't happen every season. But I think then it was something like, whoever won the New Year's derby had won the league the previous 12 or 13 seasons, or something crazy like that. So you're going into that, and I mean, the pressures there, as I say, Hearts weren't going away, and you're thinking to yourself, we really need to win this, because they needed to beat Rangers just to get that final bit of belief that, like, they're not unbeatable, they're not unstoppable. Brattbach, as I say, I can remember 2 or 3. There was one in particular, and still to this day, I don't know how Andy Gorham got it, but I mean, that's standard. There's a lot of chances down the years you could probably say that about. And you're just thinking, like, we're all of them here. The sucker punch is coming, and luckily it didn't. As you say, the ball broke the Jackie in the edge of the box. There's a reverse pass to Craig Burley, who slotted it home, and for a minute you kind of looked and you were like, oh, he's offside there. He wasn't.
Yeah.
So you kind of thought, oh, he's offside. You realise he wasn't. You go to celebrate, then you think to yourself, hold on, it's Scotland, is the flag up? Luckily, the flag didn't go up. If you look back at the footage, I think Burley even takes a glance at first to make sure before he starts celebrating. Obviously, the stadium was still being redeveloped then, but that day, the goal that Celtic scored the 2 goals into, they put like a temporary stand up to fill that up as well. And I mean, the place just went ballistic. And then obviously, you had Paul Lambert, absolute wonder goal.
But before we go on to that goal, which we're going to talk about in terms of Paul Lambert, see when Craig Burley scored that goal, and as you said, it wasn't offside. Can you remember your feeling? What did you feel straight away? Was it just pure delight, or was it relief? Because a lot of fans would be like, "Yeah, we're delighted, but it's more relief getting that goal because you know we can go and win this game." What was your feeling?
It was a bit of both, and then obviously you're thinking to yourself, right, this Rangers team's coming back at us. But strangely that day, if I remember right, it almost seemed to knock them more than it galvanised us at the time, because I
Yeah,
think because there was so many derbies that went the same way, and then we finally didn't let the sucker punch happen,
yeah.
that they just
Is
kind of went, wait, hold on, this is a different, we're dealing with something different here.
in the game as well, I think there was a big penalty appeal. Do you remember that? I think it was Colin Hendry. The ball went into the box and Alan Stubbs challenged for it, and
Uh,
Stubbs went
I,
down.
I actually don't remember much about that. I do remember, like, we were more or less, before the Burley goal, and even to an extent after it, like, we were absolutely camped in and around their box. It just seemed to be wave after wave of attack from us. And I don't know whether maybe Walter Smith came that day looking at a point, thinking, we'll get the point, win the last derby at Ibrox, they'll drop more between then and we'll win 10. I don't know what the thinking was, or maybe we were just that fired up to make sure that day that we won that game. You know,
Yeah, and in terms of the game as well, like you said, we're dominating, we're getting in their faces, we're creating chances. When Paul Lambert scored that screamer, what in terms of a midfield player, as we always said, he was vital to the team. But that class coming from Dortmund, winning the Champions League as well with them, it must have made a big difference to the whole squad. I mean, that must have galvanised them even more. What was your memories of that goal?
well, I think bringing Lambert in as a European Cup winner and stuff, the support went right. Maybe we're taking this a bit more seriously. And at the time, as I say, like, Bradbeck was probably, I wouldn't say one of the most sought after strikers in Europe, but he certainly, he was quality, like, for Rosenborg in the Champions League, scored against some big teams. So he was coming with a reputation as well. So you're looking at it going, maybe we're actually starting to play or try to play Rangers at their own game a wee bit. Obviously we done it legally, but uh, you know, when the ball broke to Lambert and he hit it, I actually thought it was drifting wide, and then the crack off the post. I don't even know why Andy Gordon died, to be fair, because no keeper was saving that. You know,
I think, yeah,
Paul
it's almost
Lambert,
like as well. It was written the stars type of thing for Lambert to score that goal, wasn't it? I mean, when he, as you said, he came to Celtic reputation, and we only really got him because he wanted to come back home. Otherwise, he wouldn't have probably wore a Celtic shirt. Maybe towards the end of his career, yes, but not in his prime, so to speak. When that ball broke to him and he scored that goal, then you're thinking to yourself, "Yes, we've done it. We can go for this title." Now, what I'm
yeah,
going to say to you next, you brought up a very good point. I didn't even realize this point when I was doing my research, but I'm going to say a name to you, and I want you to tell me what comes to mind, right?
right,
So the name I'm going to throw to you, who seems to have played a big part in this for whatever reason. I mean, you can educate me on this, but Bobby
yeah.
Tate, what was
Oh,
his what was his
Bobby,
role in this 10th season? Tell me, because I really want to know.
right, Bobby Tate. There's two games that stick out, and the first one, I don't want to definitely say it was Bobby Tate, but the second one definitely was, and it worked against him, and it was beautiful. But Bobby Tate, that was Bobby Tate's last season as a referee, and without going too in depth, Bobby Tate would have been the same sort of school as your Hugh Dallases and your McCurrys. So you
Okay.
can imagine with Celtic, right? So there was a game in March away to Hearts, and as I say, I'm not 100% confident that it was Bobby Tate as referee. Something tells me it was. It might not have been. Somebody maybe be able to correct us on that. But we were 1-0 up, and Hearts were still there at the time,
hmm
and they played, and this was, them days. If you weren't there, you were waiting on teletext or whatever to tell you what the crack was. And you're waiting and the game's not over and the game's not over. And you're wondering what's going on. And Jose Quitongo popped up and equalised. And the Hearts fans went ballistic. And they're not straight away. As soon as the game kicked off, the whistle was blew. And you're going, well, where did all that injury time come from? Was it played a hard score? Like, what's going on here? But as I say, whether or not that one was Bobby Tate, I'm not 100% sure. Something tells me it was, but the second one definitely was, and this story, absolutely brilliant. So, you're probably going to talk about the Old Firm games in April, but we'd lost at Ibrox, and obviously then there was a couple of draws at home as well. I think one was the Motherwell, and then the third last game of the season we drew at home to Hibs. Now, if I remember right, that was the game that relegated Hibs. So you're thinking, like, that's two massive points dropped. We've let them in here. Like, and they were at home to Kilmarnock the next week. And as I said before, Bobby Tate's last season as a referee, his last game was that game. He'd handpicked it. He wanted the referee. His last game at Ibrox, and they were drawn 0-0. And Bobby Tate played on and played on and played on. And the next thing, Kilmarnock pop up 1-0, and then it puts us in the position to go to Dunfermline and stop the team. And it was
Brilliant.
absolutely beautiful because he'd handpicked it, obviously trying to help them win the 10, and it completely backfired on him.
See, I've got down here, I don't know if it's a quote, but I got it, and it says his beloved Ibrox. I mean, but Bobby Tate is... Bobby Tate is... Go ahead, sorry.
If I'm right, the Kilmarnock goal scorer that day was Ali Mitchell, and there is rumours that obviously Radio Scotland or whatever were doing the thing, so it cuts to Radio Scotland, but before it cut, whoever it was going over said there's been a goal at Ibrox. So everybody obviously thinks, oh no, Rangers have scored late on, and the next thing the commentator says, and Super Ali. So obviously you're thinking Ali McCoy because that's what the Rangers fan call him.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that Super Ali. It was, in a sense, our Super Ali. Ali Mitchell popped up with the winner, and I mean,
that's brilliant. I mean, in terms of Bobby Tate, like, was it well known he was a Rangers fan? Like, is it definitely true that he was, or was it just in them games you could definitely tell he was?
It's 100% he handpicked that game as his last game before he retired. So I mean, obviously I was 11 then, so I mean the referees wouldn't have been as much as a focus as they would become for me in that sense. But I mean, you certainly picked up on things even then. But apart from, as I say, his link to that one, possibly two games that I've mentioned, the name wouldn't really stick out to me the way the likes of Hugh Dallas would. But certainly, I would say, I mean, if he's handpicking a Rangers home game as his last game before retirement, 2 games to go in a season where they're going for 10 in a row, you can kind of imagine where
you
it's leaning.
Put 2 and 2 together there, like, can't you? It's like, what does that actually point to, Ryan, if you think about it? If referees, I mean, I don't think in this day and age they can formally request games because there has to be a lot of background checks, and obviously if you support certain clubs you can't do certain games. But if you look at that in that season, in your opinion, now you can be as controversial as you want to be here, I really don't mind, so I want your opinion on it because I find it good. In terms of Bobby Tate picking that game, what does that point to you from the hierarchy of the SFA at that point?
Well,
do you think
I've
that was...
never ever have I heard of a referee handpicking a game before or after in my life. So I mean, if we go back to a season or two before that, when we signed George Cadet, there's a lot of people think we'd have stopped. I think that was the 8 in a row season. I think a lot of people are of the opinion we'd have stopped it that year because we only lost 1 league game with far too many draws. Some of them, ironically, would have been after Cadet should have been in the team, but his signing got held up. The name escapes me by the head of the SFA at the time. Celtic had to argue, and it was April, I think, before we got him in the team, and he scored. It was 4-4 or 5-5 once he came in, and you're looking at it going, well, you know, we only lost the league by a couple of points. If he'd have played a couple of them draws, does he turn them into wins? Do we stop them winning 8? You know, it points to basically everything being Rangers are the establishment club, and there's no other way to look at it.
I mean, as you said there as well, my granddad swears by that about George Cadeti. He's always saying to me about that when we're talking about that era, because that signing got held up in red tape for weeks and weeks, and it's almost like, as you said, the SFA were just trying to push that agenda to get Rangers to win this 10.
Well, but that year would have been the year after Tommy won the Scottish Cup for us, and you'd Pierre banging them in, you'd I think it was Simon Donnelly's like proper first like big season in the first team. Obviously, the cameo came the season after, but so going forward, like we were probably similar to now. The problems were always at the back, but Tommy's attitude seemed to be, we'll just outscore teams. And I mean, in some ways, that's what Celtic fans want. They want good attacking football. So when we're bringing in Cadet, you're thinking, right, here we go. But then, as I say, it get held up with red tape, and it was.
Yeah, my granddad always says to me as well, Tommy Burns was an excellent manager. I know we're a bit backing off topic here, but we'll go back to that. But Tommy Burns had Celtic playing amazing football at points, and it's just unfortunate at that time the Rangers team were so rampant because, as we've well established, the team they had was gained more or less illegally, being confirmed.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll move on to, as you said, the other Old Firm games in the 10 season. And I have down here my notes. There was defeats in the Scottish Cup and a league doubleheader as well with Rangers, if that's correct. Now, at that point,
and league doubleheader, 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah. So at that point, Ryan, as a Celtic fan, are you thinking, this is it done? They're going to win the league?
Well, I don't remember. I actually don't remember much about the Scottish Cup game, apart from the fact that we let, similar to McManaman, Jorg Albert pick a ball up the halfway line, and he ran and he scored. So the week you go to Ibrox, I think it was maybe 6 games to go in the season, and you're thinking, we can't really afford to lose this game. And then Jonas Thurm scores a wonderbolt. Like, it was, I don't think he'd ever hit a ball like that in his life, unlike Lambert, because I mean, most of Lambert's goals for Celtic were something special. But
yeah,
I mean, he caught one in the volley. It absolutely flew past goal. And then, same as the week before, I actually remember sitting watching it at my uncle's, and Albert picked the ball up, and straight away he's going tackle him, and they just backed off and let him run, and your Albert scored. And I remember my uncle turning to me and going, "That's it, they've done the 10." That was the attitude, not the attitude, because obviously, like, you hoped that it would be stopped, but that was the season, losing in that derby, just you wondered how it was going to affect Celtic.
In terms of as well, like, obviously that happened, the double header and stuff, which must have been a better blow to the chances. And as you said, your uncle straight away said that's the end of the 10. But what also happened around about that time, there was strong rumours that Wim Jansen was actually looking for an exit clause out of Celtic towards the end of the season. And again, that name comes up. He fell out with Jack Brown. Do you remember anything much about that? Did that unsettle the team at that point?
I don't know what sort of effect it did have. I remember, again, the press jumping all over it. And that's probably where I remember more about Jack Brown, falling out with Wim. Ironically, I don't think Wim really done much in management apart from stopping the 10. Obviously, he was part of the fanward team that beat the Lisbon Lions in 1970. This that was when the European Cup again, but so there was always a link to Celtic with him, but obviously this one's a better link. But yeah, the Jansen thing, I think Wim kind of wanted back more. I don't know whether he looked across the city and he was going, right, hold on a minute, they're bringing in players from Juventus, Fiorentina, Roma, and going, what do you want me to do here, sort of thing. But yeah, the Jack Brown thing was a strange one. But I mean, there was never really. It kind of was like Wim's going to go, and then he was seeing out the season, and then he wasn't going, and then more or less once the season was over, he was gone.
It's almost like not in the sense of this, but do you maybe think to yourself as well, when he stopped the 10, he was like, that pressure was maybe a bit too much, or do you think it was more the case of he wanted back and wanted to build his own team? I mean, because you can look at it on both fronts, do you know what I mean?
Well, I think he wanted to build his own team. I mean, we'll always be thankful for Wim for stopping the 10 and giving us Henrik. But, like, as I said earlier, as much as everybody probably wishes it was Tommy Burns in the dugout that season, you kind of look back now and you go, if Tommy had been there, would the pressure have been way too much on Tommy and we wouldn't have got anywhere near stopping it?
Yeah. It's almost like now as well. You see this in a wee bit with Lenny, because the people with the Celtic connections sometimes they live it too much. They're in their heads 24/7 trying to figure out ways to do things. But then you go towards like a European coach who comes in with not so much not knowing Celtic, but not having that connection and that expressing themselves, different training methods, to getting the players in tune. And I think I get what you mean there, because Tommy Burns, he lived and breathed Celtic. That was his whole life, and he came back to the club under Strachan as well. So when Jansen, in that way, we do thank him for that. In terms of him leaving, do you think, looking back on it, it was a good thing because it led to O'Neill, or would you have liked him stayed a wee bit longer?
Well, I mean, I don't know whether you'd necessarily say it was a good thing because we had to go through John Barnes first, but
Yeah.
well, we got Venglos, and I actually think history looks unfairly on Venglos. You know, Venglos brought us Lubo, he brought us Mialby, and I mean, Rangers went out that summer. I mean, they brought in Dick Advocat. I think that was a summer they signed Kloss, they signed Arthur Newman. You know, they went out, and it was almost like, right, you've got the title off us, we're going to spend as much as it's going to take to get it back. And it was, you know, to me, maybe Wynn being there, it would have been a different story that season. But I don't think with the money they spent that summer, we would have won the league no matter what was going on.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. But we'll track back to the 10 season. You've already touched upon the Tate game, the infamous game against Kilmarnock. But we're going to talk about the Dunfermline game that would have sealed Celtic the title that day if they had won. What in that game leading into it, were you confident that we were going to actually win that game, and even quite comfortably as well?
Maybe not comfortably, but you know, you thought, right, it's in touching distance. They'll not blow this. We'd already booked to go over for the last game of the season. And obviously, once the Kilmarnock game happened, you're thinking, they'll beat Dunfermline and we're going over here for a title party and there's going to be no pressure on the game and it's just going to be a brilliant day out.
Yeah, aye. But in that game itself, I think, did we go 1-0 up? Wasn't that correct? And we were dominating the game. And you sent me a name last night when we were talking about what we're going to speak about that I've never heard of in my life. And you're going to say it now. Go ahead.
So Simon Donnelly gave us a lead that day. And again, like Burley, some of the goals Simon Donnelly scored that season were really important. Again, didn't maybe leave in the best terms. History, again, I mean, if he'd have been the man that stopped the 10, how do you let him go then? But Craig fucking Falconbridge, excuse my French, I will never forget that name.
I never heard of him.
From Coventry, and oh my god.
Was it a header he scored? Yeah, well, a looping header?
Somebody just humped the ball into the box and he put it, and it just looped. And I don't know whether Gould had come out to meet the cross or whatever, but it just absolutely looped up. And Gould was just enough off his line and it looped down over him, and you just thought, oh no, typical, here it goes, Celtic are going to blow this. It was just...
In terms of that as well, like, that he scores that goal and it finishes 1 each, and the title race goes into the last day of the season. And you're looking at it, I think Celtic at home to St Jansens and Rangers were away to Dundee United. So you're looking at that, and I think as well, it does. If Celtic had won, they would have won the league anyway. Is that correct? They would have won the league, no matter what the result would have been at Rangers to Dundee. Is that correct?
Yes, on the last day, basically Celtic won. It didn't matter if basically we had the match Rangers result. If I remember, right. Or better it, as in if they drew or get beat and we drew or won, then so. But I mean, it probably in some ways might have been better than one of it done for them, because obviously, I mean, Celtic Park full to the brim. I mean, there was a nervous tension that could have quite easily spilled onto the pitch. So, you know, maybe winning it the week before would have been better, where everybody just could have went over, title party, no pressure, all the rest of it. But then, of course, Henrik done what Henrik done so many times down the years.
I mean, it's quite fitting that soon-to-be Celtic legend after that scored a goal in that game and things. But in terms of that game itself, I've done research, and yes, it sounds boring, but I know it was sunny, okay? And the sun was shining over Celtic Park that day. And as you said, there was this nervous energy around Celtic Park. If you could paint the picture for me for that game, what way did it pan out in your own point of view?
I just remember, obviously, as I say, I was 11 when the 10 was stopped. So, like, my uncle and all his mates and all were just absolutely like, we can't lose this. We've got to win this game. We can't let Rangers get 10. Probably similar to what we were thinking this season, like, where you're thinking if Celtic do 10, it'll be 11, 12, 13, sort of almost as many as they want, so to speak. I mean, that was the thought. If Rangers get 10, how many is it going to be?
Yeah.
And as I say, it was the send-off for Walter Smith was leaving. If I remember right, McCoist was going, Loudrup was going. So, I mean, Gorham, I think, maybe left that season as well. So you had big players leaving Rangers, and they're all looking to go out in the high, so to speak. So, I mean, they would have been absolutely no doubt what it was all about. So you were just kind of hoping for Celtic to be similar or moments of magic to happen. And Henrik certainly provided one early that day, thankfully.
And I've got down here as well, the player you mentioned, actually, Bratback, he scored in this game, didn't he? Is that correct? Yes. Yeah.
Well,
so
sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, well,
so in terms of that, then, in terms of Bratback, why in that game I'd say Jackie McNamara played the ball to him and he scored. So and how come that didn't catapult him into having a better Celtic career, so to speak, in terms of scoring goals left, right, and centre? Him and Larson being the main men. What do you think happened there?
I think Bratback liked the ball played in behind to run onto, and Celtic at the time, and then the season after when he was still there, didn't play like that. I could be wrong on that. It could just be it was one of those moves that never fully worked out. But I mean, since that day, I've done the stadium tour at Parkhead, and they actually have Bratback's boots from that game in like a glass cabinet thing. So, I mean, again, it's a name that's always going to be etched in Celtic history.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. Sometimes, even through years of Celtic, there is names in the history books that didn't have a brilliant career, but they popped up in a final moment, and a final moment in Celtic's history in terms of Bratback scored that goal as well to stop the 10 along with Henrik. And we also know as well, obviously, Rangers were winning at Dundee United at the time as well. So when that game was going on, particularly in the second half, how did you feel in the second half towards the final 30 minutes of that game? Were you nervous? Were you confident? Paint me a picture. How did you feel?
Well, if we go back, as I say, Henrik, I can still see Henrik picking the ball up now, cutting in, curling it in the bottom corner after 6-7 minutes. So you get the early goal and you're thinking, right, this is going to be comfortable. We're not going to make it edgy. We're going to... And then, of course, I mean, it's Celtic. Do they do things like that? So St. Johnson had a striker at the time, George O'Boyle, and he missed 2 or 3 absolute sitters. There's one sticks out, and if I remember, Gould misses the cross, and all he had... You're looking at it going, oh my God, all he has to do is make contact, and somehow he heads the ball over the bar. And even then, you're thinking, oh my God, like, there's going to be another moment like that. They're going to equalise. And then Tom Boyd picks the ball up, runs up the line, plays a pass to Jackie. Jackie scores it, and Bratback... I don't know whether maybe this was a difference as well, because when the ball came over that day, he doesn't stop and think. He just sweeps the ball into... And maybe that's what it was. Maybe other chances, he'd give himself too much time to think, where that one was just instinctive. But I remember up until Bratback scored, I mean, I think everybody was just waiting on an equaliser or something going horribly wrong and them getting the 10. But from that moment, Bratback's goal to the end of the game was just absolute relief. I mean, as I say, obviously, my uncle and all his mates would remember better, like, those years, and all they kept saying to each other was, we've done it. And I mean, there was tears, there was relief, it was just... And then, obviously, Cheerio 10 in a row ringing around the stadium for what felt like... I think it rang around the stadium the whole way up the road to the boat, the whole boat home, the boat terminal. And I mean, you're walking through the boat terminal maybe 1 or 2 in the morning, Cheerio 10 in a row, and you can see your fans sitting there, you know, that had maybe gone over with their head down. And it was the last... Once Bratback scored, like, it was a completely different day.
See, in terms of the game as well, Rand, you say Bratback scored there. What was... I know you said the crowd and all were singing that, but What was it like? Did it give you goosebumps? Were you just flying in that adrenaline rush? Because I've been to some Celtic matches, and one springs to mind in particular against RB Leipzig, and the atmosphere that night was unbelievable. I think it was probably the best atmosphere I've been at. What was it like for you? Was it just amazing?
The noise for both goals was unreal. I mean, I think the second one at the precise moment he scored was more a relief. Henrik's one was more, obviously it was earlier in the game. Henrik scores, you're thinking this is going to be comfortable. We're going to be all right here. Where a lot of nerves had built up by the time Bradback scored. But the atmosphere after it, like, it was just, but the only way to put it, and I mean, it's impossible to do, but to me, you would have had to have been there. It really was goosebumps. And as I say, for most of the rest of the game, I think it was just cheerio, 10-0. And as I say, that Rangers team, you know, Walter Smiths going, Gorham was leaving, Gordon Jury, I think Durant was still there, Stuart McCall, Ali McCoy's, like, they were losing a lot of big names.
Yeah.
So before they basically threw money at it this summer, you're maybe looking at it thinking, you know, are they going to fall apart with losing so many big players? Is this going to be the start of something? Obviously, it wasn't until Martin came in, but
yeah,
you know what? That's maybe how it was being looked at right at that moment.
Yeah, because it's like when they lost that, you're thinking we could go on with a period of dominance here, and obviously you touched upon there that didn't really happen until O'Neill came in. But in terms of the party and the celebrations and stuff, as a Celtic fan, and I know you said you were 11 at that time, but I mean, for me, I would have just been overjoyed. I would have been like overcome with just pure excitement and exhilaration. But is that how you felt at the end of that season?
Yeah, I remember the bus going up, and I actually think it was a different route than what it would have normally went, but it went up through all the like tenement flats and stuff in Glasgow, and the bus going absolutely bonkers because we were going past flats and there was ones out with Celtic flags and all, obviously celebrating. And then you got the odd one and you went past and there was boys out with Rangers flags and all, and the whole bus is going bonkers at them. The boat the whole way home, I think the boat bounced that night. Like, it was a party on the boat. It was unbelievable.
I mean, for me, Ryan, that's brilliant. I mean, in terms of the podcast, we have touched upon all the bases, which is fantastic. I mean, we've done it in an hour, I think, so, which is great. And I do hope whoever listens to this podcast just gets a bit of excitement, a bit of joy back in. I know supporting Celtic it's quite a bit of a drag. But Ryan, I want to say thank you to you because your knowledge of that is excellent. And have you enjoyed being on the show?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I hope you do come back on because we do plan more Celtic rewinds in the future in the coming weeks about the European nights and things like that, O'Neill's era. So that's stuff to look forward to. But I do hope, genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, that this podcast and Stopping 10 is quite ironic because I know what we're going for this season, but just brings you back to them times when it was a bit easier, not easier, but a bit more enjoyable towards the end of the season, maybe not during it, just supporting the Celtic and getting behind our team and getting behind the club for what we stand for, because at the moment, it's definitely what we stand for, the way it's going on. So I want to thank you, Ryan. Thanks for coming on the show.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
No worries. And until next time, Ryan, it'll be a pleasure speaking to you again in the future. Just want to say to everyone, stay well and keep safe. Hail, hail.